I'm sorry, are you here to see me?
No, silly. I go here.
You go where?
Harvard. Law school.
You got into Harvard Law?
What, like it's hard?
Men are to go to work and provide for the family. Women are to stay home, clean, cook, and take care of the children.
For decades, these stereotypes were a way of life. That's just how things were. And it wasn't until someone questioned these ideals that change really occurred.
Women felt as if they were not respected and had so much more potential, while men felt as if women had their place and that nothing needed change. Women wanted to become doctors, lawyers, police officers, firefighters, bosses, and much more, but were told they couldn't because men were the doctors, lawyers, police officers, firefighters, and bosses. So women began to fight for change from the ground up. They protested against the government, against society, and against norms. Men were strictly opposed to these ideas, and there was limited acceptance. It took decades for even the smallest increment of change.
Hello, everyone. I just want you all to know that I look forward to contributing to this news station's already sterling reputation.
I mean, come on, Ed, it's bullcrap. Don't get me wrong, I love the ladies. I mean, they rev my engine, but they don't belong in the newsroom. It is anchor man, not anchor lady.
Gender roles have changed tremendously throughout our history. In the late 1800s, we see a drastic change in women's roles. And today, in the 21st century, we see the roles of men have transformed. Today, the lines between men and women's roles is blurred. But what caused this? How did this change happen?
Let's go back to 1848, Seneca Falls, the first convention where women's rights were discussed. The convention was organized by women for women. Here was where the Declaration of Sentiments was signed, which demanded equal social status for men and women, including giving women the right to vote. 3 years later, Sojourner Truth gave her infamous speech, Ain't I a Woman?, electrifying the women's rights movement.
In 1916, Jeannette Rankin became the first woman elected to Congress. 3 years later, in 1919, the 19th Amendment was passed, granting women the right to vote. At this time, men were still generals, drafted for war, sent to work, and expected to provide for their family.
Women kept becoming more eager and determined to not be defined as a housewife. Throughout 1941 to 1945, millions of women entered the workforce for the first time. This was critical in the transition of women's roles. The process was very gradual, and 20 years later, the Equal Pay Act is passed by Congress. At this time, men and women were now going to make the same wages. This is the first time the lines between gender roles start to blur. Women were now taking positions in so-called men's jobs. Throughout the 1960s, we see men like Martin Luther King Jr. fighting through the civil rights protest, Neil Armstrong landing on the moon, groundbreaking news of President Kennedy getting assassinated, all of whom left their footprint in history. But it wasn't surprising that men were all these things. It was expected. Their roles were fulfilled, but in the 1990s, a breaking number of women were elected to Congress. 1992, the year of the woman.
In 1989, there were reported 1.1 million stay-at-home dads, and in 2012, that number jumped to 2 million. This is one of the first crucial changes we see in the role of men becoming stay-at-home dads, nurses, hairstylists, nail technicians, and makeup artists, which were commonly referred to as women's jobs. Through this time, we also see an increase in women CEOs, women politicians, women police officers, women athletes, and other jobs that were typically men's jobs.
Hi sisters! What's up everybody? Welcome back to my channel!
As of 2019, the makeup industry has soared. At the top of the pack are two men who are the most sought-after makeup artists today, James Charles and Jeffree Star, when 20 years before men were shamed and called names for wearing makeup.
As for the past few years, up until today, most couples will now have a full-time job and share financial responsibilities for their home. In the past, a full-time job and financial responsibility was expected in the role of men. Past gender roles would have expected the woman to carry out the daily household chores, the cooking and cleaning, whereas now the jobs at home are very much shared. In some families, we are seeing a complete role reverse from the past, where the woman is going out to work a full-time job and the man stays at home to look after the children and carry out chores.
These changes occurred because people stood up for what they believed in. Women protested to the government, fought as hard as they could, and even though extremely slowly, they did see a change. Right to vote, equal pay, equal job opportunities. These changes rooted from the ground up and became part of the everyday life in 2019. In the last election year, we saw a woman run for president, the youngest woman billionaire, and more than half of all college and graduate students consisting of women.
My name's Nikita Shabak, I'm 16.
I'm Jim Waterhouse, I'm 16 years old.
I think that 95% of Australian companies are run by men because
Maybe it's because men think of themselves as more dominant or are more aggressive.
I think that 95% of Australian companies are run by men because men are seen as more intimidating.
So now, men and women are to go into the world and do whatever they please.